Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? Lightning Vend. Today is a great day. I agree. Good morning, New Wolders. We love it, Ben. Doing great. Muslim Bitcoiner. Assalamu alaikum. Biden laser eyes. No crypto Super Bowl ads except for Jack Dorsey with Satoshi sweatshirt at the game. Sitting near other celebrities. I'll take it. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good advertisement. Free advertising. John, good morning. In case those didn't see it, indeed, as Muslim Bitcoiner has described, Jack Dorsey was in a private booth of the game with Jay-Z and what's her name? And indeed, he had a Satoshi Nakamoto shirt. Sun is up in Florida. Amazing Bitcoiner. T-Dog, good morning, Bitcoiner. It's going to be an amazing week. I think so. Good morning. Who won the game? There was a game. Good morning, and thank goodness for Satoshi Nakamoto. Indeed. Dave will be morning. How you doing, my man? How you doing? All right, let's acknowledge that, indeed, the sun is up here on the Atlantic coast. We're doing great. Sunrise Tech fully operational. The money is also working. Bitcoin propagating around the world. We don't have any troubles. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. But first, we got to talk about all the fake news. So I tell you all the time, right? And I can say this because I'm Canadian, but I always try to underline and remind you all that Canadians are the dumbest people in the world. It's just there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can say about it other than that. And we have some pretty good examples today. All right. So here, what do we get from Canada? So you know how all these news sources in the United States are firing everyone, right? We heard about big layoffs, right? Washington Post and all these places getting rid of people. What happened in Canada too? All right. So here's the first one here. This comes from CBC News, who didn't have to fire anyone because somehow they're like government something, right? Oh, I don't got no Phil bump today, Jose, but I got some good stuff. I think Phil gets the weekend off, right? He gets the weekend off. But we got some great stuff. I got a very special last one today. We're actually going to be analyzing a whole article. It's going to be amazing. But hold on, until we get there, we got to start with this one, the Canadian news. So this comes from CBC News, right? So they got rid of a bunch of people at CTV, Bell. These are very, very low IQ outlets, and I'll show you why in a second. So first of all, it starts with Trudeau. This is the headline from CBC. Trudeau pissed off by Bell Media's garbage decision. A fired up Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unleashed on Bell on Friday, calling its move to lay off thousands of employees, including hundreds of journalists, a garbage decision. But here's the good stuff. I just had to set that up, right? So you know how everyone was worried, just like in the States, what are we going to do? What about the hard-hitting journalism? What are we going to do with all these people fired? You had Lisa LaFlamme, who might be the dumbest Canadian. There's a whole bunch of people who could be the dumbest person. I don't want to pick winners here, right? She used to be one of the nighttime broadcast people, and she was going for a hike and praying for all of the journalists. And democracy will die, she says. Democracy will die. Oh, with all these layoffs, Canadian democracy so healthy and robust. What shall we ever do without articles like this? So they've already fired these people. All right. Oh, by the way, I'm also doing the Michael Malice trick where I'm trying to go and find these journalists and warning them to update their bios. Go look for a job, right? He had some of the really good ones. You know, the boomer music guys. Hey, if anyone needs a boomer music critic to write for their newspaper, this guy's looking for a job. So there's a whole bunch of those. If anyone wants to go out and look and troll some of these Canadian journalists, go ahead. But this is what we'd have to do without this. This is them operating without their money. All right. So this is an actual headline from CTV News. This is one of the groups that fired a bunch of people this weekend, right? What would we ever do without all these journalists? All right. This is a real headline. No comment will be added. I'm just going to give it to you. An alleged gang rape shocks Italy and provides fodder for an ascendant far right. I don't want to laugh about gang rapes, but they made it funny. They made gang rapes funny. I don't know what to say. Sorry, gang rape people. Sorry, victims. I can't help it. Okay. Only Canadian stupidity could make a gang rape funny. They did it. Thank you. Thank you. So that's pretty good. Here's another good one. This comes from the Vancouver Transit Police. They're wondering. They got to get one of these fired journalists on the job. They should hire them as a detective. They don't know whether the sexual assault suspect is male or female, despite having the semen evidence of the raper. Don't confuse the gang rapes in Italy with this case. This is a different rapist, okay? Different rapist. So there you go. Pretty good stuff out of Canada. So you know the plan with RFK, right? Like, don't give him security and we'll see what happens, right? That's been the Biden plan. The Trump scam is to arrest him and see if they can turn the fake news against him and the judiciary and the legal system and all that. The plan with RFK was much more simple, right? It was just don't give him any protection and we'll see what happens, right? But that hasn't been working. So they're going to go with the Trump way now too. We don't know if they're going to take Trump's Secret Service away from him, but we'll see about that. But now they're going to ramp up the lawfare against Robert Kennedy. So Democrats have opened a federal investigation into RFK Jr. Oh, what? The Democratic National Committee accuses RFK campaign and Super PAC of illegal coordination and seek to exclude him from the presidential ballot. We got another one. DNC files complaint over RFK Jr. Super PAC's efforts to put him on state ballots. So this is from NBC News, right? And apparently there's a big problem with his, like, the way he's going out to get signatures. It's the signatures, okay, guys? So if anyone's out there asking you to sign a thing for RFK, according to NBC News, you're engaging in elections fraud. Okay, you're into elections fraud now. So we're not going to talk much about Taylor Swift, but I have two headlines. From Taylor Swift. The first one, both of them, pardon me, from the Washington Post. Ready? So the first one is, after America's most famous pop star went public with a relationship with one of the country's best football players, most people saw a power couple. Far-right personalities saw something more sinister, a government psyop to thwart Trump's election. Okay. Now keep that headline in mind. We're just gonna flip the page here on the Washington Post to another headline, right? Now, they're not asking her to do politics, guys. No way. Native Americans in the Kansas City area fighting against their team's imagery have asked for Taylor Swift's support. She should listen to them. That's the second headline. They're going to get her in everything, right? They're going to get her in everything. They got to get her in every single thing. All right, now I've got a special edition of the Biden surrogate headlines about his health, okay? These ones are good. All right, this is from the LA Times. All right, ready? Age matters, which is why Biden's age is his superpower. LA Times, it's a superpower, guys. Come on. When I say, what superpower do I want? Do I want Superman's powers? Nah. Do I want Batman's powers? I don't know. Spider-Man? No. I want Joe Biden's. I'm really old and I get angry at stuff. That's my superpower. Oh, but this isn't one of his superpowers. But Maddow says this is why he's still not too old. It's my new hobby, by the way, watching people go out on stage to say Biden's not old. It's the funniest thing going. There's a lot of funny things happening in the world, but listening to people say Biden's fine, guys, it's perfect. It's just perfect, right? So this is Rachel Maddow, right? He's not too old to be president because, what's her reasoning? He rides a bike. It's not a superpower, though, guys. It's not a superpower, okay? He just rides a bike. Riding a bike is not a superpower. We all know that, right? So she didn't mention anything about the times he's fallen on the bike, right? She didn't talk about that, but I'm sure it's fine. This one's great. This is from the New Yorker, all right? This is from the New Yorker. Biden's righteous fury at being called an elderly man with a poor memory. It's his righteous fury, right? He's righteous, guys. It's okay. He's allowed, it's his right to be righteous, right? So good for him. And this was my favorite one of the weekend, right? You know, the guy getting impeached, Mayorkas, who I always say is just a blackmail guy and he'll do whatever you tell him, right? What proof do I have that he's being blackmailed? Well, welcome to Moscow time. Here's our headline. So he goes on the TV shows yesterday, and what does he say? That Biden is so mentally strong, so mentally strong, that the most difficult part about having a meeting with him is preparing for it. It's so hard. He goes, because he's so sharp, he's intensely probing and detail-oriented and focused. And then they printed headlines on this. It's perfect. All right. But you didn't get to we have one more special edition Moscow time. This, again, I've said before, right? Eventually, we are going to have to pick an all-time Moscow time thing to put into the Louvre. Maybe someone will throw soup on it if we're really lucky, right? They'll throw some soup on our choice. That would be awesome, right? Mona Lisa got the soup. We can do it. We can do just as well as Mona Lisa, right? So here's what we found out from the Associated Press. It's my favorite. Associated Press is my favorite. All right. And here's the headline. The president jailed 1% of El Salvador's population. Their children, the children of El Salvador are paying the consequences of Bukele, guys. I'll read the whole headline again. The president jailed 1% of El Salvador's population. Their children, think of the children. Their children are paying the consequences. The children of El Salvador. All these gang guys had children. What are they doing? Well, we're going to find out. They interviewed a bunch of them. I'm going to read the whole article. Let's see what the Associated Press wants you to know about El Salvador. All right. Tears welled in Alex's eyes, and he pressed his head into the hands he thought pardon me. Tears welled in his eyes, and he pressed his head into his hands as he thought more about a year of birthdays and holidays without his mother, right? Who was swept up by the El Salvador's police as she walked to work in a clothing factory. I feel very alone, the 10-year-old said last month as he sat next to his 8-year-old brother and their grandmother. I'm scared, feeling like they could come and they could take away someone else in my family. Right. So 40,000 children, they say, have been one parent or both detained by Bukele's nearly 2-year war on El Salvador's gangs. Right. The records were shared with the Associated Press by an official with the National Council on Children and Adolescents who insisted on anonymity because they didn't want the government to any government reprisals against them. Right. The official said many more children have jailed parents, but are not in the records. There's even secret parents gone. Secret ones, secret, right? By arresting more than 1% of his country's population, Bukele, who won re-election to a second 5-year term, is trying to break the chain of violence that has ravaged El Salvador for decades. But many worry that debilitating poverty, long-term trauma, and government failures to protect their children could instead fuel a future wave of gang warfare. And they're going to have a future wave of gang warfare. Kids aren't spared when their dad, brother, or mom is detained. They carry the trauma with them. They feel as if the president has robbed them of their family, right? It could push the kids later to join a gang as a form of vengeance. I wonder if they talked to any of the Satanists down there. Did they do that? Did the Associated Press do any interviews like our friend Graduated Ben the other day about all of the Satanists and praying to Satan when they kill people? They didn't put that in there. Okay, that's not in there. It gets better, though. It gets better. Here's the, in his effort to eradicate the gangs, Bukele has detained over 76,000 Salvadorians, many with little evidence or access to due process. Families pass months without any news of their imprisoned loved ones. Human rights groups have documented widespread human rights abuses. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal said Friday night that with 100% of the votes counted, Bukele won 84.6% of the vote. The crackdown has broad support among Salvadorians who have been able to retake their neighborhoods, but children left without parents, have been among its heaviest costs. So they go on, right? It's all about kids and all this stuff, right? Kids, kids, kids. The whole article is about kids. And then they get into stories, Alex and his brother. They don't get any welfare payments, apparently. Other kids do, but there are too many gangs in theirs, right? So there they go, right? Let me find the one. Yeah. So the point here, obviously, is that they're using manipulation. By the way, anytime you see kid stuff, it is deliberate to manipulate you so that you don't actually use your rationality. And it goes back to what we've been talking about, that Michael Malice observation from last week, that the corporate press or legacy news, whatever you want to call it, we got to stop calling it the mainstream news, because this ain't mainstream anymore, right? The legacy news or the corporate media, that it's really about making you feel a certain way, not actually giving you information. The whole thing is a hypnotic dance in order to conjure feelings, and then the feelings replace any aspect of rationality, right? So the point here is to, more or less convince people that there's something going on, kids and this and that. And kids are one of the most obvious examples, right? The minute you bring kids into it, which is why I actually can't stand when Greg Foss, when he does his For the Kids thing, it's absolutely retarded. It's the stupidest thing that happens in Bitcoin when I have to hear this, right? Now, it's implicit for the kids. You don't need to say it, right? But going ahead and saying it really is a rhetorical, sneaky move, right? Because it allows you to not be judged on your own actions. Oh, you're for the kids. How could anyone disagree? Who is out there saying, fuck the kids? Who is that? I want to meet the one person whose political opinion is fuck the kids. Now, manifestly, it's how almost all policy is, right? Kids are absolutely an afterthought in most of our policy, but no one is out there saying fuck the kids. Nobody. There's just zero people, right? That would be a dumb idea from the beginning, and for any group to go with that, right? So emotions are not tools of cognition, exactly, Jose. And more sinister is that when you use kids, you can't help but put emotions into the situation. You have to be really heartless, right? Good thing us Bitcoiners are psychopaths, and we can totally disassociate from that kind of manipulation. But you need to be a Bitcoin psychopath when it comes to this stuff. Like, how many people could actually laugh at the story in El Salvador? How many people can do that? Could laugh at the Associated Press's efforts to make children feel, to use children in this way? There's not a lot, right? Not a lot of people, Bitcoiners in particular. This kind of article would have worked perfectly 10 years ago. I mean, this would have just crippled maybe the El Salvadorian government. And when I read it, it made me thought of how many times this has happened in the past to other Central American, South American places, right? Forget them, anywhere in the world. The American war machine is very capable of doing this. And what's fun about the El Salvador example and about Bitcoiners knowing what's going on down there is that it's possible for us to see through this stuff and see just how much manipulation goes on by using kids as an example, right? So again, I'll call it out on the Bitcoin side too. Greg Foss, when he does it, I understand it's a punchline of his. It doesn't trigger me. I'm not angry about it. It's just dumb, right? It's a good idea for a little while, maybe 2 years ago, right? Get a new line by now. But it's also part of just cheap manipulation, right? It's not really persuasive in the long run, because eventually you'll tune out of it, and eventually it won't make much sense. But again, this media system designed to affect your feelings first and motivate people in that way is losing steam. Like I said, the El Salvador thing, not really as good, right? And now that more and more people are waking up, take this Michael Rappaport thing. You know, Michael Rappaport, the actor. And I always had hope for this guy, actually. I really did. I never really gave up on Michael Rappaport, right? Michael Rappaport, the actor. So he was in, I think we spoke about him once. He was in that movie, Beautiful Girls or something, which was quite a good movie back in the 90s, where a lot of people started singing Sweet Caroline. It was a part of the movie story. And I guess Natalie Portman played like a teenage girl in it or something like that. I remember I was a teenager when I watched it, so I thought it was great when I saw it. I haven't seen it since the 90s, but I remember seeing it and thought it was great. And Michael Rappaport was great in it. He's been in a few movies that I thought were pretty good. I always thought he was going to come around in some way, right? So again, like Bill Ackman, who we'll talk about in a second, he's another one of these people who's been lifted out of their hypnotic trance. And he was on the Patrick Bet-David podcast of the day talking about this. And he was talking about Charlottesville, right? He was saying Charlottesville was a hoax. He only recently found out it was a hoax, and that they did Trump dirty on it, and that he would, act accordingly going forward. He's now more or less teasing that he's on Trump's side. He will never vote for Biden. But again, just look at this in terms of persuasion and where the line is moving, right? So when you see Biden and these folks come out, I can't get enough of this, people coming out supporting Biden publicly, saying he's super smart, his brain is great, right? It's awesome. Like, we couldn't be in a better position. We could, and now I'm starting to think that he's actually going to be the candidate, right? JD Vance had a really neat observation this week about how you can have a look at what's going on in the world and judge your own form of conservatism, I guess you could say, by the prediction about who's going to run. So this is what he said. He came out and said, let me find his quote here. He says, the will Biden be replaced on the ballot question is a good proxy for what conservatives believe about our elites. If you think our elites are mostly midwits who are motivated by status anxiety, the Dems are probably stuck with Biden. If you think our elites are evil super geniuses, maybe the Dems can replace Biden with Obama, Big Mike, or Gavin Newsom. I know a lot of these people. My vote is for the midwits. It's Trump, Biden, 2024. So JD Vance, the senator from Ohio, one of the seed round or early round investors into Rumble. So he's a with it kind of guy. And so again, he's coming out here saying that the persuasion capacity of these people is way less than you think it is, right? We are actually dealing with a situation where we're either dealing with criminal masterminds or semi-retarded people who are drunk and stupid most of the time. He's saying, one of these senators who has a pretty good front row seat, we're actually dealing with mentally handicapped people here, right? So Kamala Harris and Biden and everything else that comes out of it. We're dealing with a type of mental incapacity. Which is why it's so funny to see them all out there trying to vouch for Biden. It's destroying people's reputations the closer they get to him. The closer you get to Biden at this point, to start saying, no, he's fine, guys. He's so smart. He's just so with it. It's hard to keep up with him. Each person that has to go up and do that, I want 8 more months of this. I want 8 more months. I want him drooling. I want him to get some kind of a strokey situation too, where his face gets super contorted and he's got drool coming out, and you've still got people saying, no, don't you know? He's great. He's great. Nothing could be better. Because he's becoming such a farce that he's starting to repel more. So the persuasion is now going backwards. You're starting to get people who say, what the hell is this? And one of the great examples was last night during the Superb Owl, right? I call it the Superb Owl, right? Not the Super Bowl, it's the Superb Owl. So we had the Super Bowl last night in America, right? Everyone watching this and that. And normally the president gives a speech an interview during the Super Bowl, right? It's a traditional thing, but he had to turn it down because he can't sit down in an interview. He just can't do it, right? It's not possible. So he did a recorded talk yesterday. And what was his recorded talk about? It was about Oreos and Doritos and Pepsi and Gatorade, and it was shrinkflation, right? So he comes out and he goes, while you were Super Bowl shopping, did you notice smaller than usual products where the price stays the same? Folks are calling it shrinkflation, and it means companies are giving you less for every dollar you spend. I'm calling on big consumer brands to put a stop to it. So he came out and he started going on about shrinkflation and consumer shit food, in the worst type of food you can find in America, the stuff that's poisoning us, right? So this is one of those things, again, where it's going to repel people. Now, there's a million low IQ people out there who are like, they don't even know what inflation, shrinkflation, all these things, right? But when he comes out in the context that we're in now, I don't expect Democrats to figure this out, right? I don't expect that. But when Republicans who will, in the same way that people in the Trump side, remember when I said when Trump started talking about CBDCs, you'd get a bunch of Democrats who'd start saying they're the best thing ever because they have Trump derangement syndrome. So Trump can't be right about a thing. the opposite must be right because Trump said it, right? So people whose brains are really affected by Trump and really have mental illness caused by his presence, there's something a little bit similar in the other direction where Republicans, anything that Biden says, not out of a derangement syndrome, just because look at this guy, they'll say anything he supports, I want the opposite, right? So last night you had Biden coming out to teach America about shrinkflation. Now, any Republican who saw him teaching about it is going to think the opposite, but they're not going to say it's shrinkflation, but they're not going to let him get away with the argument that it was the grocery store brands, it was Pepsi Cola's greed that has caused the trouble with this stuff, right? So Turdemeester comes out and says it takes a weird kind of hubris to attack and blame the victims of your ideology. Truth is that inflation is always created and perpetuated by government decree, whereas shrinkflation is a totally understandable way for business to deal with soaring input costs. It's just a good strategy. What are they supposed to do, right? They're trying to adapt to the climate, but the climate was altered by the monetary policy. So now that people are going to be even more repelled, think about what this did. Think about every Republican who saw Biden explain that the problem is the greedy grocery store folks, right? Well, these are people who didn't even know that inflation was 100% and always a monetary phenomenon. They didn't know that. Now, equal and opposite reactions, you're going to force a bunch of people to say, well, what really caused it, right? What really caused this? So the capacity now for other people to wake up just because Biden has adopted this as a talking point grows, right? So you get more people who are going to be able to understand what's happening and realize that it's not Hostess, it's not Frito-Lay that's causing the trouble. Frito-Lay and Pepsi and all these guys didn't on their own just say, hey, I got a great idea. Let's all conspire together to shrink our packaging and what's in our products, right? That never happened. What happened was everyone was dealing with the same input costs. Everyone had to figure out a way to keep prices closer to the same. So the answer was, in every case, shrink the portions. Normal adaptation, right? I remember it happened years ago when we had the inflation in the 80s and 90s with chip bags. Remember what they did was to keep the chip bag in the same, well, if you weren't around at the time, but I remember because all I bought were chips. Like I was a kid, right? So I'd get like $1 and I'd go buy a bag of chips. They were 50 cents for a little bag of chips. What happened was they invented the snack bag, the little snack bag that you now get at, that did not exist before that I could remember. It might have really existed when I was younger, but I never saw it. In the 80s, you had the sort of small bag, and then they invented the little bag, right? They kept that at the same price, and then the now medium bag, they called the top of the bag bonus, right? Like 50% bonus, but it was twice as much as it was just a little while earlier. So that I remember that happening as a little kid, right? And that was a normal adaptation. They literally created a new size of product in order to get over the problem. They created a smaller bag to keep the price the same. In the end, that didn't work either. That became, something else. But you'll still see some places that do that, right? So the point, though, being that the capacity, people like Michael Rappaport not going to be affected by Biden talking points any longer. People like Bill Ackman, right? What have we been talking about? Bill Ackman. So Bill Ackman did the same thing this weekend. He exposed the Washington Post, right? So he did a really neat way of exposing it. So he was complaining that he gave a bit of time to the Washington Poop to do an article on him, right? And he knew it was going to be shit, but he said, I want to be sure on my end that I didn't treat them poorly or do something that would be inconvenient to slant the article against me. I won't be combative. I'll pretend that they're trying to write a nice piece on me, right? This is Bill Ackman, right? Bill Ackman, the guy who has destroyed Harvard, right? So, and most of higher education in America, a hero. So he comes out and is waiting for this article to be written, right? He's waiting for this article from the Washington Post to be written. As I said, he put a whole piece in there where he said, I did my best. I put good faith towards it to see what they come up with. I was ready for some criticism, but what did I end up getting? So he goes, you guessed it, a total slanted hit piece according to a formula. So he puts the formula here, right? He goes, So he puts the first paragraph, right? The subheading of the story is Bill Ackman used Wall Street tactics to oust Harvard's first Black president. He's part of a wave of business leaders attacking diversity initiatives spurred by George Floyd's death. Right. That's the context that the Washington Post gave. Then it goes in, this is where he gives his formula, right? To translate for the Washington Post audience, a rich, racist jerk, or worse, used Wall Street, which is in quotations, read by the WAPO audience as crooked, tactics to fire Harvard's first Black president. He is part of a group of other rich people, i.e., business leaders, who are opposed to diversity and who are indifferent or worse to George Floyd's murder, right? In other words, the subheading explains that Bill Ackman is an anti-environment, anti-social justice, elitist warrior working to reverse recent social and environmental progress in the world, right? And he says, I also made the mistake of agreeing to be photographed. The subheading is followed by a portrait where half of my face is in shadow. This is a well-known media tactic to create the impression that the subject of the story is two-faced and evil. I'm already in, I'm always in, I got to get my sun action here better because I'm always in the double, half shadow. Anyway, thanks for the tip, Bill. So, so here, Bill Ackman even knows the formula now for how these articles are written and what goes into them and how they go after him, right? And remember, my own, I quit the fake news. I used to do the fake news all the time, right? I used to go on CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News. I'd go on all the fake shows. And when I lived in New York City, and I stopped doing the fake news shows when the George Floyd thing happened. They called me up in the George Floyd thing, and I could already see all the articles. You remember them all if you were around back then. If you're around in 2020 as a Bitcoiner, you remember it was article after article in the New York Times. Why aren't tech bros doing more for George Floyd? Why aren't Bitcoiners more appreciative of George Floyd? Because none of us gave a shit about this, right? Yeah. When did you stop beating your wife? Richard asks. Yeah, exactly. So, then they called me. Okay, they called me to go on the fake news to talk about George Floyd. Unlike Bill Ackman, I was certain. I didn't humor them. I was certain it was a trap. Right? I was like, what am I going on this? What am I going to say about George Floyd that is going to persuade anyone, that is going to be useful to anybody? I'm going to have to backpedal exactly, like Richard is saying here, like, oh, Bitcoiners will be better to George Floyd in the future, right? I wasn't going to do that. It was a trap. It was a total no-win situation. So luckily, I did a bit of work, found the right person, and gave them the right person who they couldn't do what they were going to do to me, right? So, you have to anticipate this stuff. Any one of these fake news things that comes and does a profile piece on anyone who is critical of the message is going to get the same treatment, right? It happens every time, right? Anyone who thinks they're going to treat you fairly, it ain't going to happen, right? It ain't going to happen. So, but now, what is Bill Ackman getting into now, right? So Bill Ackman has gone after Biden. He's going after DEI. He's going after the plagiarism thing. He's going after all that. But now it looks like his interests are turning even to something more relevant. Maybe America's biggest problem along with the money. I mean, it's tied in there, and that's the food, right? So Bill Ackman now talking about food stuff in America. Yikes, right? So go back to what Biden's message was. Biden's message is you're not getting enough chips for your money. You're not getting enough Gatorade for your money, right? So it repels people on a number of levels. It's not just the monetary theory that's mentally ill and retarded and misleading and dangerous. It's not just that, right? It's also the diets. America's really sick, really sick. Something's wrong with our food, right? Something's wrong. I don't touch the shit, right? I just eat the stuff in Vermont. I don't use American grocery stores if I can avoid it at all, right? I get all of my wheat from a very special place in Vermont. I get some from Quebec too. There's definitely no sprays or fungicides or Roundup or anything like that put on it, right? But it's very hard and very expensive to find. I buy the same flour here and where I am, and it's I think $20 US for 5 pounds of flour that I have to pay just to get good stuff, right? They're not giving it away at all. So the food problem is big. And I continue to think it's one of the areas where Bitcoiners are going to shine in the new economy, right? One of our goals is to make on a gold standard, cattle ranchers were barons. They were the richest people going. We want to get back to that world. We don't want the traders, high leverage gamblers that exist on Wall Street to continue to be the highest paid people, right? I don't think they're evil the way that the Washington Post is characterizing them as, but I want fewer of them, not out of rules or discipline, just out of natural exercise of our economy. So Bill Ackman now did one of these things that a lot of people do, you know, the historic videos, and you see people walking around in USA in 1930s, and now they're colorized and and everyone makes the same observation, right? Where are all the fatties? They don't have any, right? So he says, take a look at New Yorkers in 1930, after a decade of economic exuberance. There were no gyms, soul cycles, yoga classes, or running shoes. There were no diets, Ozempic, USDA pyramids, or degrees in nutrition science. Yet, look how lean everyone is. There is no obesity. Makes you wonder about the food and soft drink industrial complex and our government's oversight of our citizens' health. The industry's captured, right? We've heard it many times. It's exactly the same way as banking. It's exactly the same way as military. You get a government job, and then you oscillate back and forth between the private sector and the government, making money from everyone and doing nothing, right? So FDA, Food and Drug Administration, all of these things in America are 100% captured, right? Richard King says Vermont and New Hampshire has great organic produce. It sure does. I mean, I love it, right? I absolutely love buying groceries in Vermont. I go to all the different farms, all the different farm stands. People don't even know how good we have it. I mean, we still have the high trust society, like old-fashioned USA stuff. I can go to multiple farms around my house, and there's usually a garden shed there. And in the garden shed will be some nice high quality freezers, refrigerators, and there'll be a payment kiosk. I haven't been able to convince them to take Bitcoin yet, but the operating system usually is a cash app situation or whatever. And you have a screen, and there's a bar that you can, touch what you want to buy. There's pictures, and it makes a price, and you pay. There's no human involved, right? These are everywhere. And I'm telling you, you get like roasts and ribeyes and everything right out of these places. Now, there's some I go right into, and I know the farmers and but this is throughout Vermont. And we have a lot of those in Quebec as well. I mean, and I'm right between both of them, right? So I can go to both of these, yeah. And then the Amos Miller Organic Farm, down in Pennsylvania, I mean, unreal. They cannot do that in Vermont, right? Vermont, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so interested in getting Thomas Massey at the show in Tennessee this summer, because Thomas Massey is sponsoring the Prime Act, right? Which would give everyone in America the same situation we have in Vermont, which is that we are not subject to federal control of our beef and produce if the farmer sells direct. As long as the farmer isn't selling to a wholesaler or another large distributor, then they can sell direct to the client without any federal oversight. So the Prime Act would do that on a federal level. So there would be no more Amos Miller Farm. And I know a lot of Bitcoiners get their stuff from there. I mean, it was unbelievable when I saw it. Unbelievable, right? But I've seen more disgusting things in Canada. Canada, they'll pour your milk out if you get caught giving away raw, right? Canada can be really crazy with that stuff. So there you go. So Bill Ackman now, what I'm trying to do here is just talk about where the persuasion is now and where it's headed. Just look at these people, right? People like Bill Ackman, Michael Rappaport. Without those people still buying Democrat lies, they're very, very exposed, very weak. And it's only going to get worse, right? It's only going to get worse. Take what we saw with the war finance yesterday, right? So there was a vote yesterday in the US Senate, and it looks like they're going to try and give money to Ukraine. The Senate and a bunch of senators have defied Donald Trump. So what I said last week and the week before, right, which was Trump was going to start behaving as prime minister, right? And what I mean by that is he can control the legislative agenda because technically the Republicans control the Senate and the House. So Trump can start, as nominee, can start ordering the legislative branch to obstruct the executive branch or go against Biden or whatever, right? So in an ideal world where everything was partisan and everything was predictable in that way, what you would see now is no laws getting passed that Trump didn't want. So Trump came out and told the Senate, if you defy me on this, I'm going to smash you. And what happened? A bunch of them defied him, right? So what did we find out? Last night, $95 million will go to Ukraine, right? Vivek Ramaswamy saying the following: the Senate voted to advance $95 billion boondoggle, most of which goes to America's favorite state, Ukraine. Many Republicans are going along like puppets. There's something deeper going on here. That was Vivek's comment. Vivek, by the way, was at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday night, entered the Mar-a-Lago ballroom looking like a vice president, right? He came in order with Trump, with the wives and everything. So I think my prediction is right on. I think he's going to be announced shortly as the vice presidential candidate. He will be, I believe, at Bitcoin 2024. It's not 100% confirmed yet, but again, I've been talking to their team for 2 or 3 years now. So we'll get there, right? I think we'll get there. Not 3 years, but it's been a while. So we started talking to him way before, right? So the idea now of him being vice president, I think, is becoming clear to most people, right? Now, with him coming out and talking about a problem within the Republicans themselves, again, this is just more of the uniparty getting isolated, getting identified, and shortly getting destroyed. So the great thing Trump did and began already with kicking the Bushes out of the Republican Party, low energy Jeb Bush, one of his greatest insults that will live on forever, right? Low energy. I mean, just on artwork by Trump on that day. Bird Brain Nikki's pretty good too, but low energy it's still to this day. It's one of the ultimate knockout punches. So now you've got Trump with a totally different type of communicator in Vivek working with him, and together they look almost unbeatable when it comes to persuasion against a group that is losing people every day, right? The Bidens that have to, everyone who defends him has to burn their credibility each time, right? Which is why I want more of it. Like, I can't get enough of people supporting Joe Biden because it will ruin any other thing they support going forward. They can never be taken seriously again, ever. So it's going to take all kinds of people off the board forever. This is something you're not going to be able to crawl back from, right? So the senators defying them, really about war finance, right? Really about war finance. Here's the persuasion they're left with. And again, I'm not worried about Democrats for this moment, right? Let's come back to the Republicans and conservatives again. Here's the best they can do, right? You get this guy, Mark Thiessen or whatever, right? He's as dumb as you can imagine, credentialed guy. He was in the fancy office of George Bush II, right? He's a senior fellow. He goes on Fox News. Unfortunately, he goes on the Washington Post too. What does that say about who he is, right? Well, his whole big argument here, okay, about the Ukraine money being passed last night. This is what it's come down to. This is what it's come down to. And look at how weak and pathetic it is. Look at what we're up against. This is the best they can mount on an incursion into psychological persuasion within the Trump MAGA camp. This is the best they have. This loser, still wearing a tie done up to here, still has a picture of him, in the White House Oval Office with the last George Bush, right? And his whole big argument here about what's going on is Ukraine aid money is going to Alabama to produce the following systems. This is creating jobs for our constituents, right? And hot assembly lines and factories in Alabama that will benefit U.S. national security. Why are you voting against Alabama's defense jobs? They're going with that one, right? That war they're just saying it straight out loud. It's just so profitable for the local industry. This wasn't said out loud before. Now that they're having to actually be like, hey, job plan, let's kill some Ukrainians and Russians. It can be great, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't hit. You had, of course, David Sachs. Now, think about it. Go back to persuasion. Go back to persuasion on the, persuasion on the inside the right wing. right? Inside conservatives, inside MAGA, inside whatever. Is it Mark Thiessen, who's got a Ukraine bio in his flag, who we can all discount as being mentally ill or worse, right? Or David Sachs, who quote tweeted him and said, a quick economics lesson on the, and this other guy is supposed to be one of those expert academic people, right? He was one of the people that used to write op-eds to try to change people's minds in the Washington Post for Bush, right? Well, that world's gone. It does nothing. David Sachs comes in and bitch slaps him in the face and says, hey, loser, who doesn't understand anything about anything, right? That's not how you create jobs. As an entrepreneur, as one of the PayPal mafia, David Sachs's advice on how to create jobs is much more persuasive than Mark Thiessen, right? If government just prints money and gives it to people, stimmy checks, that does not create value. It creates inflation. If the government hires people to dig holes and fill them back up, it's the same as stimmy checks, but with the illusion of employment. If the government hires people to make holes in other countries, it doesn't create any value. In fact, it removes productive resources from our economy. The only thing that creates prosperity in the creation of goods and services in America is the creation of goods and services that Americans actually want. Some amount of defense spending is necessary, but it should be seen as a cost, not a benefit. So the losers have no hope here. They cannot win this fight unless they beat people in the head and kill a bunch of people. But that ain't going to happen either, right? So, and that ain't going to happen because here's the way people are starting to think, right? You've got people changing their mind, the Michael Rappaports, the all of these folks, right? But at the same time, you get what we found out again from BlackRock this week, which is where things are headed, right? Where things are headed. You don't have to convince the sludge people. The sludge people don't matter. I know it's hard for your own life because you've got to deal with a sludge person who's like, Trump's not going to win, Biden's great, oh, his brain is great, right? You don't have to care about these people. They don't really matter. Because when BlackRock and soon energy companies say things like this, right, that Bitcoin is creating a global internet of value, and that importantly, and this is what Larry Fink said, right, the guy who runs $10 trillion AUM, assets under management, 10 trillion. It's like the fourth largest economy in the world if it was just his money. It's not, but I'm just telling you how much he commands, right? He says, if you're fearful of your government or worrying your government is devaluing the currency, then you could see this as a great potential long-term store of value. It's like digital gold. BlackRock's out. They're not supporting these losers anymore. They want to make money. That's it, pure and simple. They don't care if it's Alabama jobs or whatever, right? Now, there might be negative forces, Carlyle Group folks or whatever, but there's a lot more at play here. And the Carlyle Group, they're going with Taylor Swift, right? They're going with Taylor Swift. Now, it's Taylor Swift versus Trump. Trump went after her this weekend. I don't know if you saw it. Perfectly clever the way he did it, right? I did more for her than him. He could actually negotiate Taylor Swift to like a standstill now. Taylor Swift, call her whatever you want. She's not an idiot, right? Imagine coming out today to support melty face Biden. Everything that I've said about these people, how it destroys them. It will destroy them. Anyone who comes out and supports the drooly faced, broken brain, mentally ill thief, the steward of the gondola, anyone who supports this guy is going to have to wear it in the future because Trump won't let them forget, nor will Vivek, nor will anyone, right? So, and we still haven't even done the full tally of what this administration and what this thief has cost us, right? But we're going to, and it ain't going to be good. It ain't going to be good. So, the ability to continue to persuade, the ability to turn the tide here is drying up real quick. And, folks like BlackRock, folks like you're going to start to hear American energy companies changing their minds very, very quick. So there you go. Let's get to some comments. My daughter is gluten intolerant. Most products here in North America cause the problem, but the Ukrainian wheat smooth saying, well, here's what you got to know. And you can get this stuff from RFK, who says that it was Roundup, and the gluten intolerance comes about in the mid 2000s, 2005. And what happened then was they found out Roundup. So Roundup is fine as a weed killer and fungicide. It kills fungus and things like that that would affect early growth of the plants. What they found out was that if they spray it at the end, crop dust it at the end, you actually don't have to harvest the wheat. So the harvest of the wheat took timing. If you have to let it dry while it's still out, and if you harvest it wet, it will rot and it will go away. So what they found out was, so you got to time it right? You got to get a dry season in September, and you got to go, and you got to take it then, and you got to keep it dry. So what I understand is they figured out that if you spray it once more with Roundup, right, the fungicide, that even if it gets wet, it will never mold. Right? It can't get moldy anymore because it's killed the fungicide, right? That's what the Roundup did. So they found out that a second spray of Roundup was perfect to get 100% yield of the wheat. Now, the spraying of the Roundup works best in the Great Prairies and the wheat fields because you can crop dust. It didn't work in Vermont. You can't crop dust a valley with just a little uneven thing of wheat, right? That's why our wheat stayed okay, because we couldn't do it. We couldn't actually do the second spray efficiently. And that became institutionalized across American wheat and Canadian wheat. So all of these at scale are spraying it a second time. Now, a lot of people say that's what causes the gluten intolerance, is that it's actually Roundup, which is killing the stuff, the gut health, right? It's killing your gut health because that will go in and kill this. It's like almost like taking an antibiotic in a way, right? It's a fungicide that kills everything around it, including the healthy stuff in your belly. So that's what I understand. That's what RFK says. I don't know. Now, I for a long time have been eating higher quality wheat, and indeed, they don't do that in Ukraine, I don't believe. And they don't do it in some of the more expensive wheats that you can buy in Canada. I know there's a Quebec wheat maker who absolutely doesn't do it. And there are good ones in Vermont as well. King Arthur is pretty good. There's a few others. So there you go. Let me see what people are saying over on Rumble. Yeah. People that are truly gluten intolerant are suffering from a serious autoimmune disease, having celiac disease. Most claim or stay away to avoid inflammation. Yeah. They're not blind. They just don't know. They don't know about the Roundup thing. No one ever bothered studying it. It's literally, I didn't know a thing about it. It sounds legit. I don't know if it's legit, but RFK says it, and I've looked into it, and I know the timing, because that's when it all happened, right? It all happened. The first gluten intolerant celiac people I ever met were exactly the same time as the gluten thing, as the Roundup thing started, or the discovery was made. So there you go. Put the flour through sourdough. That will do too. Yeah. Put the flour through sourdough. Yeah. A lot of people use the sourdough. Yeah. Can you please tell me where I can learn more about the split in April? I know nothing about it in Courtney's Fellowship of Oddballs. Yeah, it's called The Halving. We're going to run our own show at Bitcoin Magazine about it. It's just the miner reward. Every 4 years, it's programmed to cut in half, right? So it's something that's known. And the miner reward, if you don't know how the mining reward works, it's not really a lottery, but think of it as a lottery. Like everyone who's mining is mining, spending electricity in order to have a lottery ticket to play and get the reward, right? So if you find the nonce, right, and you have the answer and you can find the block, what's going to happen is you're basically putting up your lottery ticket saying, I'm eligible to win, right? I'm eligible to win. And that's how the new Bitcoin is created. They give you the new Bitcoin, right? If you win. Now, it's not exactly a lottery because the speed of your processor affects the rules of the game a little bit, right? So, but there is still chance. There is still randomness. So what happens is the reward you win goes in half. That's it. That's all you got to know. It has a huge effect on the mining industry, though, because what they're paying for is less, right? Yeah, we're doing a show on it, and it will, it'll be a great show. You'll have a lot of people. Yeah, it's the glyphosate. Yes, exactly. Listen to Zach Bush, MD. He speaks a lot about glyphosate and how it's poisoning us and our environment. Yeah, it's the it's the glyphosate. That is what is in Roundup. That's the thing that's causing the sick biome in your belly and in your daughter's belly. So that's what I understand, though. Again, this is all bro Bitcoin science stuff, right? Which I think is accurate, but remember, all the science that is real is the one I believe in, right? So that's the only real science. So as long as I believe in it, it's real, right? Just like you, the science you believe in is real, right? It's a better metric than anyone's, because there's no way to tell, right? Do your own research. Do your own research. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me see what these guys have. Yeah, he did all the research. I believe you, Sergio. Yeah. Having estimate. Oh no, we're out of. Oh, hold on. I liked it better when it was 420. What do you guys think about the thumbnail this morning? Pretty good one, huh? I got that from Styx Hex and Hammer, the superb owl. The superb owl. So I got a good number of watchers this morning. That's great. Rumble folks piling in. Sluggo, good afternoon, Rumblers. Good afternoon, Sluggo. Paradox, good morning. Happy 10 Sat VB Day. Happy days ahead, indeed. Wake and break, French Fry says. Indeed, we love it. We love waking and breaking, right? Hey, everyone. Hey, J-Lo. Sweet Sluggo says Swedes are as dumb or dumber than Canadians. You might be right. Yeah, you might be right. I only claim expertise on the dumbness of Anglo-Saxon populations, and they're not exactly that. So I think Canada would win in a dumb off between Americans, New Zealand people, English people, Irish people, Australian people. But I could be wrong. I've seen some really amazing mentally ill, handicapped people from those countries before. I just think the problem is, so my reasoning is this, right? And I think it's pretty accurate. The reasoning is this: because Canada is so close to the United States, all the American brainwashers created a Canadian proxy. So like there's always a Canadian division of the Sierra Club or Greenpeace. They don't really usually make a Greenpeace for these shitty other countries that are far away, right? So it's usually just Canada gets like McDonald's Canada, like there's a maple leaf in it. Like the England one, it's just McDonald's, right? And Australia, it's just McDonald's, and New Zealand, it's just McDonald's. Canada, it's McDonald's, and there's a maple leaf. These are all like separate companies in a way, because it's easy to separate the American business from the Canadian business. But all that to say is that all the think tanks, all the experts, all the people that Mike Benz points out all the time, well, they all have their Canadian counterpart. So the brainwashing per capita in Canada is much, much higher. It's much, much higher. So that's the problem, is that you have more mentally ill fiat zombie sludge people per capita in Canada, and they're perpetuating more of the stupidity in Canada. That's my theory. That's my working theory. I could be wrong. If you can tell me why Sweden might just be dumb straight. I don't know if it needs to be a reason. You're right. You could win the prize for stupidest group of people in the world many ways. I don't think there's one way to win. So they could do well. I feel like the Finns would have something to say about it, though. I've been to Finland, and they're really dumb. They're really dumb. I was very surprised about how stupid they were. So, but all shitholes, right? All shitholes. So there you go. We got more comments here. VHC, this is going to be a fantastic 2024. Hey, why don't you have an actual video on some things you talk about on your show? Yeah, maybe sometimes. As we saw last week, Biden is either a criminal or demented. He's a criminal. No, we know. He's both. It's not either. He's both. He's a demented criminal. All right. So there you go. Yeah, they're in general extreme left wing. Yeah. Most of them, like I said, when in the Canadian ones, we got all the same situation. So that's why we're just buried with these dumb people. In the end, it will only be Bitcoiners, gold holders, or friggin' Amish that will be in a position to save the kids. Everyone else is bound to the sick ones. Yeah, I think so. Epic guess. Yeah. Kamala's on drugs. The money is running. Wasn't her thing amazing? Drunk this weekend. I finally found out what it was. It was the courage to have, because she said it in the drunken thing, right? I've been unburdened by what has been, the courage to see what will be, unburdened by what has been. That's the one I've been looking for a while. I know I've tried to find that line a few times on the show and I couldn't remember what it was. I found the compilation and I found the video, and it's just amazing. Okay. Vivek will become a VP indeed. Roy Co Cup asks, sorry, man, but I don't get the Moscow time joke. Why Moscow? Here's the thing. So you remember yesterday when Jack Dorsey, when he was up there with Beyonce and Jay-Z, had the Satoshi shirt on at the Super Bowl, right? Free advertising. It was great. He had the exact, the Satoshi thing. So if you remember, they made him come and testify about the 2020 elections, and it was still COVID, so he was testifying on Zoom from home. So the Congress hauled his ass in and said, why didn't you get the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop case off your platform faster than everyone else, right? It was one of these things. And if you remember, on in his background, something I should have here, but I change my studio too often, is a block clock. He had a block clock in the back. Okay. So block clock, if you guys don't know, is like a consumer product for Bitcoiners that it looks like an old-fashioned alarm clock, like physical numbers that can move and rotate, right? Just like a clock would, like. So it's very physical. As many things in Bitcoin, we prefer physical to digital often, right? So it's a physical box with no LEDs or anything like that. It's just different numbers that move, and you can set on this clock what you'd like it to display, right? So we have on our set in most of our Bitcoin magazine shows, you'll see a block clock in back. It's block height, block time, mempool, hash rate. The block clock only does a few different things. Now, this is why it was funny, and this is why we call it this. So as he was testifying, right, the Washington Post, all these genius journalists, okay, were like, what's that? But they don't know anything about Bitcoin. There's nothing on it that would tell you it's Bitcoin. You just have to recognize it as a Bitcoiner, right? But it was prominent. It was like his whole shoulder here, right? So the fake news started saying that Jack Dorsey was, because the block height that he had on it corresponded to the time in Moscow. So the fake news convinced themselves, no kidding. The fake news, they wrote articles, they did all this stuff to convince themselves that Jack Dorsey was signaling to Putin that like mission accomplished or something. So that's how hallucinating fake news into reality became Moscow time for many Bitcoiners, and how I used it for my show to talk about hallucinations in the media. So that's the true story of why we call it Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time, right? We love Moscow time because Moscow time is a famous example of hallucinating fake news. And, we like to call it out. We like to call it out. So I hope that helped you with your answer, Roy Co Cup. But that's what's going on, right? Future Hodl. Any places in Europe that you don't consider a shithole, looking at the angle of better flag theory? Well, if your angle, if you're an American, you're fucked. Europe won't help you at all. But what I would say is, Portugal had a decent deal. I think there's going to be more deals over there. I think Italy's going to have to get real. France is shitty because in 3 months they just imply you're a citizen. You get the social benefits, but who wants those? It's like 90% tax or something stupid. So be careful of France. I don't know. I mean, I don't think of Europe as a place I would ever want to live. It's a place, I mean, all there is to do is eat food and chill out. Like there's nothing else to do there, right? What do you do in Europe? Like, I don't know. I don't think about it too much. I mean, if you move around, they can't get you, and it's easy to get around Europe. That's what I like the transport. I like the trains and everything in Europe, and the town. They're nice, right? I've lived there a few times, but I wouldn't do it for flag theory, I don't think. Or maybe Malta, these little islands. That's where a lot of Bitcoiners do. Gibraltar, these little stupid places. But I don't know the answer. I don't know what. I think they closed. I think they closed Portugal to be a good place for scamming taxes. It used to be you could sell Bitcoin tax-free in Portugal. So it was a big hub of tax-free sales places. And you'd go for like a month and there's no tax, anything for that. All right, team, that's all I got for today. Okay. I hope you had a good time. I had a great time. Thanks for coming. Much love, everyone, right? Much love, everyone. Moscow timeout, indeed. All right, everyone. Peace.